Well, hello everyone. I think we've probably got all of our participants here with us now. Welcome on behalf of the Australia, Aotearoa, New Zealand chapter of AI for LAM to today's webinar. I'm Basil Dewhurst from the National Film and Sound Archive of Australia, and I'd like to introduce my co-host Sydney Shep from the Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. Sydney, perhaps you'd like to say g'day and give us a welcome from across the Tasman.
Absolutely. Kia ora tātou, ko Sydney Shep, taku ingoa, he kai whakaheri o Waitiata Press o Victoria University of Wellington, te herana waka. And as is common in our part of the world, and we encourage you to share where you're coming in from and your versions of greetings. We like to begin with a welcome. Kia koutou na mona, na awa, na waka, na tupuna o Aotearoa, me te whenua moi moi, e hui hui mai nai, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. To you, the mountains, the rivers, the waka, the ancestors of Aotearoa and the land of the dreaming that are gathered here, greetings to you all. Kia ora, Basil.
Thanks, Sydney. So I'm personally coming to you from Ngunnawal country, where Canberra is located, and this is where I live and work and play, and it's a really beautiful part of our country. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of this country and the country on which we meet. This is land never ceded, and I'd like to also pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today. Now, just as a reminder, this session's being recorded and we'll be posting it on YouTube after today. And I'd invite you to use the chat function to introduce yourselves and perhaps indicate where you're joining us from. Today's format will really be a session from our colleagues at the Public Record Office of Victoria, where they'll be presenting their work. And that'll be followed by a set of questions and discussions. So you can be using the chat to lodge any questions as they occur to you. So now to introduce our speakers to you, we have Kate Follington and Asa Letourneau, who will be talking about lessons learned from their work at the Public Record Office of Victoria, or PROV, on conducting description and transcription at scale using AI and machine learning technologies. Kate is the Manager of Communications and Public Engagement at the Victorian Archives Centre, and she's managed a number of significant digital projects as part of the digital transformation program at PROV. And this has included managing the redesign and build of the organisation's website using Drupal, with multiple integrations and incubating a number of innovative digital tools to enable access to the state's visual collections such as maps, plans and photographic records. Her digital team and wider staff are currently working with her to experiment on generative AI and machine learning for large-scale transcription. And before working in Melbourne, Kate was the Director of Marketing and Development for the Museum of Vancouver. Asa, who also joins us, is a painter and public servant. He's been with PROV for 20 years, starting out as an exhibitions officer and mutating through various roles in his current positions into his current position as online engagement officer, where he helps PROV to offer new services to researchers and staff, and in a bid to open up the archives and make them as accessible and engaging as other resources held within libraries and museums. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Kate and to Asa.
Thanks, Basil. Thank you for having me, everyone. This is my first presentation to this network and I'm really excited to be a part of it. I thought that I'll share my screen. So I'm hoping that I'm already sharing my screen, but maybe it is sharing?
Yeah, certainly is.
Okay, great. Great, and that's moving okay?
Yes.
Yep, great. So the thing about government archives is that we collect records and are constantly ingesting thousands of records every week into the repository, and that includes photographic records of the development of Victoria. And those historic photographic records will often come with little to no description. And what may come, because what government photographers used to do is they used to go out, they'd take photographs, and they would have a classification list or a subject listing. And they would sometimes mark up the photographic negatives with those subject classifications. And so really the only way with which we can describe those photographs is if somebody physically digitizes them and then manually transcribes that data that we have, or creates the description on the fly as we're ingesting those photographs into the collection. And that does or doesn't happen depending on the priority of the project, but PROV's responsibility is not necessarily to create description or keywords, but is actually to ingest and conserve those records or preserve those records long term. So this is who we are, the Archive of State and Local Governments in Victoria, from the 1830s right through to the present day. What I wanted to do was to try and see if we could find AI and use AI as a way to reduce the drudgery and to expedite that process of description as fast as possible. And so I went out thinking that this would be a really simple, easy workflow to identify and find online. And I really struggled to find anything that would actually meet our needs in the various ways that we needed it. However, I did find this little application called Labeler. I did trial some of the other bigger ones like Labelbox and some of the other bigger ones. And I went through their sales team and I explained archives and how they work and what we want to do. And they really struggled to understand what we were trying to do. They didn't understand why would we want to do that. So then I came across this application called Labeler, which is an image annotation workflow. And these image annotation workflow applications are usually used for things like medical imaging, insurance companies identifying crashes on cars at scale. It's not necessarily used in this particular context of describing a photograph or an historic photograph. But one of the, I guess, strengths of Labeler was that it had the AI integrated into the workflow itself. So not only could it ingest images at scale, but it would also be able to apply an AI prompt. At the point with which we started having conversations with them, they hadn't applied it at a batch application of that prompt across thousands of images. So we negotiated with them that if we were to take on this application, would we be able to work with them to improve the application so that it would work better at scale, so be able to apply the batch across thousands of images. And they have been awesome. They're a group in India called Tensormatics, and they have been responsive to all of our requests. So just to give you an idea of what you see when you search our photographs with no description. So this is what happens. You do a browse search. You go to our photo search page, you filter on ports and harbors, and then there is thousands of images like this one, which has photograph 157 not described. Literally a non-discoverable image. You would not find it otherwise unless we applied keywords to it. So you only really find it if you're doing a browse search or a visual search with your eyes, which is not very helpful. And so that's what I wanted to try and fix. So why did Labeler meet our needs? We wanted a workflow which was logical. You ingest the photographs, you apply a prompt at a batch application. You have a user management system where you have multiple human review to ensure that the description and the keywords and any information transcribed off the image is accurate. We would be able to do either a manual ingest of thousands of photographs or an API ingest of thousands of photographs. We also wanted the benefit, if we used our public API to ingest the photographs, that we would be able to pick and choose the metadata fields with which would best give the AI bot the chance to describe the photograph with additional or contextual information. And so that's what they were able to do for us. We were able to provide them with an API query string, which included within the query string 5 or 6 descriptive fields of existing metadata. And that was who created the record. Even having the agency name like Melbourne Harbour Trust helps inform the AI bot. The date helps inform the time frame with which the photograph was taken in order to help the AI bot inform objects within the photograph to describe that. Any descriptive field that we had, we were able to add into that API ingest process for the query string. But we can do it for either manual or for API. And then, of course, once the human review process is over, to be able to export that description with the image file in a format with which we can then use at the other end. So whether it be CSV or whatever. So I'm going to take you through what it looks like from the back end because I think that's very helpful. So basically what you do is you start off, you create your data set, you give your data set a name, and then you upload it. Then you choose what sort of data set is it going to be. It's going to be image. So you collect image, which is that one in the middle there. Then you do your manual upload, whether it be through Google Drive, whether it be a local PC, or whether in the case of us, it's an API, and we've already provided them with that API string, which is built into that button. And then you build your annotation screen. So with the annotation screen, you can either create your metadata fields based on the titles with which you want to give them, so that you can do manual data for the human reviewer. They may be able to add extra details in if they're actual subject experts. Or in our case, I do that because I think that's helpful. If we have a volunteer who's a maritime expert, then all of a sudden we're getting this extra maritime additional information, which is awesome. But we also have the captioning field. So you just click caption, and you add that classification. So at the classification at the top, I always put Google Gemini Pro because that's the name of the AI bot that's created the description, which I think is important for provenance, future provenance. And then you've got your caption. And then with the caption, that's where you put your AI prompt. You put that straight into that prompt field there. And in our prompt, we have, I think, 5 or 6 requests. So we've asked it to transcribe all the headings written on the actual original negative, which includes classification, negative number, date, location, and notes. We then ask it to look up a classification list and make sure they identify the classification acronym as 5.3K or whatever with the actual subject. And that in maritime listings might include the name of the harbour, the name of the dock, the type of ships, wharf workers, dock workers. It's a whole range of subject areas. Then give a maximum of 5 keywords about the photo, then give a short description. And then we actually ask it to make sure that it writes it in key value pairs. And key value pairs is where you'll have like subject ... result, date ... date format. And we've asked it to do that so that at the other end, when the data export is made, our data guy who ingests all the data into the catalog, when they're in key value pairs as a formatting structure, then it's much easier for him to sort that data into an Excel sheet ready for ingest. And we also ask it to do it in en.gb so that we make sure we get British English in all the descriptions. So then you put in your prompt, and then you go to your file listings, select them all, and then you run the model, which you can see up here. The run model is Gemini. So you just run that model against all of those files, and then you go back to the label tab, which is this one, and voila, all the photographs have the prompt applied against them. So we usually do it in sets of 200 to 300 per set, and then you can see that it's done everything that I've wanted it to do. It's got the classification, T3 neg, it's got the negative number, it's got the date format in the correct format. So we ask it to do computer date format because it's a lot easier in the ingest process. The location, the name of the tugboat, a simple description, including the name of the tugboat, and yeah, it's done basically. And then we get, you know, human reviewers to review it, which are our volunteer team. This is another example. In this case, it's read data off the photograph, because the benefit of Gemini Pro is it's multimodal. So not only can you ask it to do things like keywords and description, but it can also identify objects from the photograph and then transcribe details within the photograph, like the word Panama and street signs. So City of Melbourne street signs will come up and it'll add that street name into the description as well. I don't know if you can see that data, how small it is for you, but hopefully you'll be able to get a sense that it's pretty accurate overall. And then this one I thought was a really good example where it's actually not a photograph, it's a map. And it's actually devised logic from the map to describe the map. So it's saying a map showing 2 of 5 proposals for shortening the distance from Hobson's Bay to Melbourne and improving the Yarra River. And that's basically transcribed the data off that page and then summarized it for the description, which I think is a step beyond what I thought it could possibly do, given we'd asked it just simply to describe the photograph. So that's quite impressive, I thought. Now, the benefit of API is on this particular screen, you'll see up there on the right-hand side, it's got file metadata, and that is where your additional metadata fields will appear when you do an API ingest, rather than a manual ingest. So the API ingest, not for this particular series, but the next series we're doing, which is an API-driven series, we'll have description, creating agency, and also additional titles which come from the photographic album cover, which will add and certainly help to inform the bot. And then once you have done your first review and your second review, which is review 1, human review second, you will then select all the files and you just simply export them out. These ones are unlabeled because I didn't want to get into the projects when I was preparing this presentation, because I didn't want to screw up the volunteer team's work. But yeah, basically then you export those out into your CSV file. So basically, in summary, that's the project. We have been running this project now. Well, we did the tweaking and the finding of the labeler application and working with the labeler team to get it to work the way we wanted it last year. And then we started this project in November with 2 volunteers, and we now have 6 volunteers working at home online, working with this project. And we finished one batch of 4,000 photographs already, and we're about to work with the next one, the 8363, which is another Harbour Trust collection. And so my learnings, I guess, was that use small sets to begin with, because you're going to be tweaking that prompt. One of the unexpected hallucinations that came from this project was that if the ship name was in a different language, like if the ship name was in Japanese or Korean, the assumption made by Google Gemini Pro was that the ship must be in a Japanese harbour. And then that threw it off its location, and all of a sudden the descriptions were based in Japan or Korea. So you really need to sort of do small experiments with the prompt to see what additional data you need to put in that prompt to give it a good direction. And when we realized that it was making assumptions off the names, we changed it to include, please describe these photographs in Melbourne, and giving it a location really helped with better, more accurate, detailed description. we found, including the classification lists in the prompt, I thought it wouldn't be able to do the lookup and response, but it did it fine. It was actually not a problem at all. So we've been putting up to 20 classifications in any prompt at any one time because they varied. I mentioned it can handle on-image object identification along with description and generative language. Using the key value pairs with a colon and asking it to write its response with line breaks between each pair. That was very, very helpful for our data guys for ingesting the data into the catalogue. For a time estimation, it takes about 15 minutes to apply the prompt against 200 to 300 images or each set. Which isn't very long, really. Just basically go have a coffee and come back. It's taking about 2 minutes per image for the volunteers to do the human review process. Make sure that your files that you're working with have some kind of a unique identifier for the matchup at the end into the catalogue. Otherwise, there's no way you'd be able to match them up. So you have to have some kind of unique identifier or file name that will marry with your archival data in the end. And that's the costings. It's $500 a month, plus the use of the Gemini tokens for the processing, which is about $2,000 for the processing. And then in total, it's cost us 17,000 Australian for the project for the year. That's it from me. Do you want to talk now, Asa, and we'll wait for questions at the other end?
Sure. First of all, fantastic work, Kate. That's really amazing stuff.
I'll stop sharing. I think I've got to stop sharing.
All right. I'll see if I can start sharing in a minute. First of all, just want to say thanks for the opportunity to speak. It's fantastic to be able to share the kind of work we're doing here at a very small agency with a very small number of staff, so that's great. And this, as I think you know, is basically built upon a lightning talk I gave at Fantastic Futures in Canberra initially. So I've added a few more bits and pieces to make it a bit more up to date. But let me start by giving you an overview of where we've come from in our little journey in terms of transcription. So as you know, there are two wicked problems for archives. One is digitization, massive amounts of work there. And the other one is transcription and indexing, to try and get a handle on the content in those records. I was looking specifically at that wicked problem of transcription using automated machine learning processes, sparked by Kate's passion for basically just increasing the efficiency of what we do here at the archive, not only to engage users with the records, but to make them more accessible and to make us as accessible as other memory organisations such as libraries, galleries, museums, those sorts of places. So this is the start of my journey basically in 2023. I started just looking around doing an environmental scan for what was possible to automatically transcribe 19th century handwritten records. I came across Transcribus in January 2023. It's a free service at that point. You can just do some quick and dirty, sandbox type experiments. And I did those experiments. And because of my lack of knowledge of the software, I got actually some very disappointing results. And I thought, is this really going to happen? Is this a possibility or not? Didn't take long, because from September to December 23, after starting to look around in July, I then created my own private model. So a model obviously is when you teach the machine through pattern recognition to basically get a handle on the records that you've got, the style of writing of the authors involved. And then over time, it learns those patterns of handwriting and can then automatically transcribe to a certain degree of accuracy after a amount of time. So from September to December 23, I created 3 private models, culminating in an error recognition rate of about 5%, which is 95% accuracy. I used that model for our first hypothesis, which was a one hand, one author machine language build. And then basically I expanded that to about 10 authors, 10 styles of handwriting in the same series, which was the Board for Protection of Aborigines Correspondence Files. Got to a point where I could actually transcribe a page of handwritten material in about 28 seconds with that 95% accuracy, which was a pleasing result, but I knew I could do better. So I went to a public model. So the great thing about Transcribers, which is an Austrian-based organization, built the software, they offer a number of public models which have been built over thousands and thousands of pages worldwide. And I found a public model, which did about 97.5% accuracy, which was much higher than my private model. Started using that and got a much better result. Started exporting different formats such as docx, text files, PDFs, XML files, just to see what was going to be useful in terms of ingesting that transcribed material into Solr and our own search environment for our website, because that is the ultimate goal. Sorry,
I just wanted to jump in.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think we're seeing your slides.
I'm just about to share a live
Sorry.
demo now. I'm not sharing the actual presentation slides. I'm going to do something really ambitious, guys. I'm going to do a live demo of Transcribers. Let me see if this works. So I don't know if you can see this coming up now. This is Transcribers, and this is, yeah, you can see that. That's great. So this is from the Ned Kelly collection. This was my eureka moment, or the Ned Kelly moment, I should say. So this basically happened in August 24, where I was so pleased with the public model for transcription. I looked at the Ned Kelly collection, which is 5 individual series comprising nearly 7,000 pages. It took me about 52 hours to transcribe those 7,000 pages, to be exact 6,712 pages. So 52 hours with an error recognition rate of 2.75%. So about 97% accuracy. And you can see what I'm showing you here is page 18 of one of those series. And that gives you an idea of the kind of result we're getting. You can see that, can you?
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, great. Okay, great. Excellent. That's good to know. So that was really, really kind of exciting, being able to transcribe that many pages in what was basically a short amount of time, considering how long volunteers would have taken to manually go in there, look at it, review it, transcribe it. Now, obviously, they're the subject matter experts, and they were doing an amazing job. They always do an amazing job. But it's just nice to know that we can get a foot in the door of machine learning and take some of that heavy lifting off them if we need to. They're still part of the review process. And then we make a decision going forward. Are we going to have reviews of this? Are we happy enough that this is accurate enough to basically help search and help researchers get their heads around 19th century handwriting, which, as you know, isn't the easiest thing to read. So it's all about, you know, quick wins, basically, in terms of how we want to go forward this kind of work. So that was the eureka moment, the Ned Kelly moment. In the future, we're now looking at tabular records. So it's all good and to be able to transcribe handwritten 19th century pages, but what about when you come to indexes and registers? Is it possible to use machine language software to actually transcribe those tabular records? So I did some early experiments with that. Let me see if I can get this up on the screen now. This is a building notices register and index. I'm just going to chuck that into my browser and see if that actually works. It's always interesting doing live demos. I could completely fall on my face or be an amazing victory. Let's see, it's coming up now, hopefully. Let me know if you can see this register. Can everyone see the register on the left-hand side?
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. And on the right-hand side, you can see what my table model has done. It's basically tried to find these cells in the rows and columns. So that's what the first model's done. It's found the regions, the cells, and the rows and columns. And then a second model, which is a public model, in addition to my private table model, has then transcribed the information in those cells. It's done an okay job, but I found over time working with a small set of volunteers that a lot of the time some of the cells were merged. The transcription made mistakes in terms of the actual transcription of the content. And we found out that I wasn't at a point with the tabular records yet where it was going to be a real benefit to the organization. It was going to take too much time for volunteers to review and correct. So that's work in progress, where I'm going to have to really try and hone my private tabular record to be a lot more accurate than it currently is. But that's something to move forward to. And what's going to happen now in the future, after transcribing handwritten records and tabular records, is the idea that we can upgrade our IIIF viewer. Does everyone know what a IIIF viewer is, first of all, before I even talk about it?
Yep.
It's basically, okay, it's basically like an iframe. It's just a big frame on the website, on a page, and you can view images in it. And it's an international standard for viewing images and video and annotations. So we've got one of those at the moment, but we want to upgrade it so it can actually show an image and then a transcription next to it. That's the future we're moving towards. But we're moving, you know, as fast as we can. Remember, I only started learning about this transcriber software in 23. It allows us at the moment to process about 36,000 pages a year, and that's going to cost us about 5,000 Australian dollars to do that. So we're moving as fast as we can to try and get to a point where we'll be able to offer researchers to the website IIIF view or iframe, which shows the record, the transcription. They can search within that transcription, and they can even possibly over time download and demand a transcription. So we're going to provide hopefully a transcription on demand service over time, in addition to the digitization on demand service we already provide. That's hopefully one of the great benefits of the work we'll be doing. Now, let me show you a quick look at some tabular records, in addition to the one we're just seeing there, because this is going to be the real wicked challenge for me, is to get a tabular model that actually gives us the accuracy that means we don't have to make it an onerous review task for volunteers. And then when I can finally do that, what I'm working on now is allowing us to look at those tabular records or indexes and actually ask the machine to identify regions within those pages and then apply structured tags to those regions. So if you've got an index and you've got a name on the index and you've got many columns of names, the machine will not only identify the name region, but it'll apply the structured tag name to that region. So eventually, hopefully, when we can transcribe and provide all this data to our website, the users will be able to ask for specifically a name, and the name is such a name, and they'll go straight to that record. They'll see in the IIIF view on the left-hand side the actual index, and on the right-hand side, they'll see the transcription, and it will be known as a name by the system. So it's like a semantic extension of what we're currently doing. That's the future, hopefully, we're going to. And hopefully I'll get some more questions about that as we do it. But that's basically an overview of how far we've come in the last 2 years.
Looks awesome, Asa. What fun.
Thank you. It's been a big learning, Basil, it's been such a learning experience, because not only do I have to learn the software, I have to use it and experiment at the same time. But that's what I like doing. I like getting dirty in the sandbox, mucking around, finding stuff, discovering stuff in the dark. And then after illuminating those things, learning from it and moving forward to see what's possible.
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
Okay, go.
I was just going to say that, you know, OTD has been around for a long time, but one of the challenges for historic archives is that handwriting transcription was not very good. And now we've reached a point where handwriting transcription is quite good, like as we've demonstrated with transcribers. And now it's about working out how do we integrate this sort of technology into our workflows so that when someone orders a digital record, they get a transcription sent to them at the same time, and then we can display that data on our website as well. So that's where we're at. And that's the digitization on demand side, which potentially we could charge for as a way of building revenue. Because we charge for the digital copy, could we charge for the transcription as well? That at the moment is a block because it has to go through Parliament to have anything we want to charge the public. So that's a block, which is a shame because it could be a really fast way for us to build revenue. And the other thing that's a block is getting tabular data to work well, because most searches in archives like ours are a two-step search. You do a name lookup and a file number, then you go and apply the file number against a bigger file. So transcribing the full file is unlikely to be the direction we go in. It's more going to be the indexes and the tabular data that we're going to be focusing on, because they pull the names out and they pull that sort of file number out. That's where we need to be focusing our energies, as Asa was saying.
Yeah, to support discovery and that activity.
Correct. Yeah.
That's really interesting, because I had a question that kind of relates to this. Asa, you were saying how you were talking about how you were taking the outputs of transcription and shunting them into Solar to support the search indexes that
discovery
enable discovery for users. To what extent are you making the transcriptions themselves available publicly? So are they just going into the Solar index, or are you presenting them also?
Right. Well, actually, Basil, that's coming in the future, all that Solar work. But
Mm-hmm.
what I'd love to do is what the Swedish National Archives are doing right now. They've just released a minimal viable product of their IIIF view, which is based on everything going into Solar. But what they also do, which I would love to do, is one, make the IIIF manifest available through a download, but also make the transcription available as a text file download, which is what they specifically do. So it would be raw data coming from the website for both. There's also the possibility of exporting this kind of data from transcribers in the METS format, which is another international standard for data, discoverability and transport. So we don't currently use the METS format yet, but we can always possibly look at converting METS into other formats which are going to be useful for users. Mm-hmm. But I would definitely want to make sure any data that comes out of transcribers is available to the user in the raw format. And as I said, as a text file or other files, which are going to be not just in Solar, but available publicly through APIs like we're doing with our public API right at the moment, or as a download, as I said, as a text file.
Yeah, so
it's actually
open, so to speak.
Absolutely open. This is the stuff that Tim Sherratt has been, God bless himself, has been doing for like decades now. He's saying it's not good enough just to have stuff searchable on the website. It has to be available as a download, as raw data. And that's, the dream that I have.
That's so cool. Hey, we've got a couple of questions in the chat. We might read those out. So Emma from Aotearoa, well, firstly, thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, Emma.
She's saying AI is notoriously biased because it's obviously learnt from biased data. Who knows where it's come from? What issues did you guys come across with in terms of dealing with this bias in the AI description, and how have you sort of mitigated for that?
This is a fantastic question, Emma, and Kate will probably give you a bit more context around it. Unfortunately, I made a massive rookie mistake in my first initial use of transcribers. I went to probably one of the most sensitive series, BPRS 1694, which is correspondence files for the Board for Protection of Aborigines, and was looking at that as a corpus to experiment with. And obviously there's a lot of sensitivity around that, and staff from the Crew Records unit were obviously reluctant for us to be working on that sort of corpus with these early experiments because of the information involved. They're all open records, but, and this is a really interesting point, Basil, wider point about whole using machine learning, is that when you use machine learning automatic recognition, not only do you put a massive onus on other parts of the organisation, such as those staff involved in digitisation, because now they need to, keep up with your demand for digitised records. But you also open up whole areas of research that probably weren't available before. So Kate will probably talk a bit about, Kate, what was your thinking about all the sensitive stuff we were dealing with? Yeah.
Yeah, when we did some experiments early on using the photo description software with Labeler, but Labeler is the application, but it's Google Gemini Pro, which is the AI bot. Most of the photographic records we're using at the moment in this, in these projects are don't have those concerns around sensitivity. Because they're photographs of ships and boats and dock workers and stuff like that. It's all pretty, not very sensitive. However, when we did experiments on the Olympic collection, there were all of these women walking around the stadium, and because of their physique, they were identified as men. So it was an interesting kind of experiment that the bot was unable to see the difference between men's bodies and women's bodies when it came to athleticism. That we haven't applied this tool to any collection that's got a large number of people in them, because our collections don't actually have large numbers of people in them. But we did see examples come up where it was kind of like, ooh, that's a bit weird. So we did come across it, but overall I'd say location has been the one that it's struggled the most with. And so probably my learning from this is that you want to have data sets that have some similarity around them, or you may find the description goes there's a lot more hallucinations. But because these data sets the subject matter is quite similar, we're not, and they're all located in the one location, because we were able to add Melbourne Harbour, Melbourne Port to it, that allowed it to find St Kilda, to find Port Melbourne, to find Fisherman's Bend. It was identifying those key locations that weren't necessarily identifiable on the photograph themselves.
Yeah, of course. I was so interested by, the fact that your approach was able to pick up in terms of that map of the mouth of the Yarra that you were showing, pick up the actual contextual data in that gives a level of richness to the record that you just wouldn't get previously. I might just circle back, Asa, just to a comment you were making about, working with Indigenous material. Ben Cheston had a question about data sovereignty and particularly about dealing with cultural sensitivities. I mean, obviously these are government records, but they are talking about people. And
they are, and I should give you some context around that too. After that era of judgment, we decided to not go near those culturally sensitive records at all. So I've been using many other series at the moment which are not culturally sensitive. But the other thing I need to stress is that the work I'm doing is probably the most benign application of machine learning out there. So hallucinations don't really have a role in what I do, because the worst hallucination you might get is a spelling error or a name, incorrect name, something like that. But with transcription work, the hallucinations are definitely minimized. And the kind of content I'm looking at is not sensitive. It's all open records. There's no private individuals identified. So it's a little bit easier for me. But, Kate has obviously had some really interesting things to say about the possible hallucination with photographs. There might be facial recognition. There might be judgments about people's emotions and that kind of stuff in photos, but definitely not with the work I'm doing. But if we were to go down that road of looking more at Indigenous records, obviously there would be all those issues of data sovereignty, and luckily we have people in government record keeping who have actually done some great policy work and documentation around the use of AI in government. And we're definitely taking our lead from those internal documents, which are made public through our website.
Oh, well, that was a question I had, is sort of what are the frameworks you put around this work? You know, have you developed some principles for working with AI in your collection?
Yeah, so I should probably speak to that one. There are. So we've developed the AI framework for government. While we're here experimenting, there's another team
Right.
that's telling the government what to do. So yes, that framework really does look at, like, where's the data coming from? How is it being used? Are you being completely transparent in its use? And so one of the reasons why you have to include the classification title of the AI tool you've used is so that every record that's generated that will have that included in its description within the catalogue for future reference. And so, yeah, just making sure that you're transparent on what tools you're using and how it's learned its data. So that's kind of important. But we also have signed various declarations related to records that may have ethnographic detail or cultural detail of, and may have cultural copyright over them. We have Koori Records Unit that work to respond to inquiries, and they respond to them every day, and they are getting increasingly bigger and bigger and bigger every day. The number of inquiries coming from descendants of Aboriginal people and asking our staff to help them identify country and language. It used to be 10, 15 inquiries a month. We're now sitting around the 30 to 45 inquiries a month. So while I fully understand the cultural copyright and cultural sensitivities around the use of AI, I also understand the question around processing that information and understanding that information. And things like transcribers can help transcribe those records that are otherwise illegible and unable to be understood. And my general recommendation is that we work in collaboration with the Koori Reference Unit, and that we work with them and their clients, and we ask those clients how they would feel about it being transcribed. And we allow that decision to be made by the person making the inquiry. And if they say, yes, I'm happy for that bot to transcribe that data so I can actually read it, then we do that. I mean, I know this is a controversial conversation, but I do think that giving the responsibility of the decision back to the researcher or the person making the inquiry is the best way forward. And going with the community and asking the community, but the community can be vast and can be very big. But yes, we do respect all of those necessary processes and protocols around cultural copyright.
Awesome. Thanks, Kate. There's a couple of questions kind of relating to, well, perhaps environmental impact. Have you factored in those sorts of issues? The issues around the fact that these data centers that are producing these large learning models and so on are consuming vast amounts of the planet's resources in order to do that. Does that come into your decision making?
It hasn't come into mine, but that's not to say that I'm not very environmentally conscious.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to suggest that.
No,
I know.
I know.
Purely.
Look, it is honestly, it is something that came to my attention after I started these projects. I feel like that awareness only really kind of started bubbling up last year, and that, it was probably early last year that I first started hearing about the environmental impact, because AI is such a new form of technology and it's just hit the world so quickly. So yes, I think this probably is a conversation that it was probably some investigation that we need to do to work out what our footprint would be, and then make a decision off that. And once we know what our footprint might be, then I think we can determine whether or not we're willing to do it or not. That would be how I would approach it.
Yeah, I guess the economics that you've shown are you know, it's so cheap to do, to really enrich your records and to, provide a benefit to users. So that's one side of the coin, but yes, then there's the other side. Elizabeth Long had an interesting question. Are you concerned that if these tools are brought into business as usual, the sensitivity concerns will lead to those records being less accessible and less described than the types of records that AI is less risky with? So I guess that's comparing the transcription versus the description work that you've both presented.
Can you ask the question again?
Sure. If these tools are brought into business as usual, sensitivity concerns and perhaps around the accuracy will lead to the records being less accessible and less described.
Because of the error rate?
I think so, yeah, than the other types of records AI is less risky with. I guess to me, I'm also sort of, I guess, sensing there's concerns around hallucination as well. And, yeah, so different types of error in the records.
Oh, so for example, if they transcribe the name incorrectly and then it ends up in the catalog interface, it's about culturally.
Oh, yes. No, I've got it wrong, haven't I?
Due to there being less risky. So sorry, the questions are related to will those records not be discovered because they haven't been transcribed? Yes.
Yes, indeed. Apologies, Elizabeth.
Look, to be honest, at the moment, many of our records that are culturally sensitive are sitting behind not closed access interfaces, but you must request permission to access those records already. So a lot of culturally sensitive records are already very difficult to find and very difficult to access. And which is why you have to go through a crew reference unit request to access those records in the first place. So making them more accessible will help the requester. I don't know necessarily if it's going to help them find them more broadly because they'll still be classified as sensitive and therefore sit behind access restrictions. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think reflecting on what we're doing at the Film and Sound Archive, there's certainly records that are embargoed and not, or items that are embargoed that are not generally available. And our enterprises team who provide access to, these items, they will have access to the transcriptions and so on, but that access will be mediated. With the end user, particularly where it's sensitive. So I think that's a reasonable way to approach access, is to allow people to discover that the thing exists, but then when you need to interrogate the item, that has to be mediated. Yeah. Do you think you've got a large... Sorry, go ahead.
Ace is trying to talk.
Sorry. Just realised I was muted. I was going to say this is a massive discussion. We could speak for hours and days about this whole idea of what happens when you apply technology to an organisation such as ours. Not only does it provide access, but it also illuminates the holes in the existing data and the places of weakness for discovery. So it's a can of worms, doesn't it? It really opens up a can of worms about what you're doing when you have these amazing tools. They're not silver bullets necessarily, but they do illuminate places of darkness in the existing search discovery journey for these massive, organizations.
Well, maybe I'll step in here because the nature of a collecting institute, particularly, a public record office, is a product of its history of collecting, the political environments in which that collecting occur, and the people and institutions from which the objects have been collected. So really, if someone is studying the politics of colonization and decolonization in the archive, to understand what's in the archive, they really have to know what the scope of that archive is. And while it seems like we're opening it up to the world, there are all of these issues around visibility, accessibility, who has the right to implement a technology, and who has the right to be the recipient of that technology. So I agree with Asa, it really is an issue that even with the frameworks, with the policy work, with the ethics around AI, it's something that we won't solve, but we still have to keep it on the radar and in discussion. And I guess the question I had for both Kate and Asa was, Transcribers initially appeared to be a really fabulous tool, great way of being able to access a huge number of archives that up until this point weren't accessible at all, that you can train the model and you get these amazing low error rates, etc. But my understanding is that you're feeding the Transcribers global machine as well. And unless you keep it in a private space, all that data that you're transcribing actually then in effect becomes and belongs to the Transcribers organization. So
that's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, could you talk a bit through some of the questions that both of you might have had about embarking on that journey, and what learnings that you've made in those spaces as Transcribers has matured as a tool for good?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly right. You do have an option to make your model public or not, and make your content accessible by other machines or not. We haven't necessarily made our private models public. We haven't made our content public in terms to be used. So it is locked down to a degree, Sydney, but that's definitely a really important question for the future. How much are we going to go down that road of data interoperability and use by researchers worldwide? I mean, I need to stress one thing during the whole discussion. We are at a very, very early stage of experimentation. So a lot of these questions we're going to be dealing with, but we're at such an early stage with this. I mean, as I said, I only started looking at Transcribers 2 years ago. I've done quite a bit of work since then and got my head around what was primarily a black box. When you said AI and ML, I had no idea what you'd be talking about. It was a complete black box. To go from a black box to creating private models is quite a journey.
Absolutely, and congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
I just want to, if Nick's on the line here, have you got some experiences you can share with us about Amazon's Extract, or how you've been using some of these tools, Nick? Not sure if you've got your voice. Yeah, there you are.
Thanks. This has been really interesting. We're using Textract. Sorry, that was a typo. Textract really successfully, and with handwriting. It's it doesn't cost much. It's cost us over the life of this project, which is a 3-year project. It's cost us about $300.
Wow.
So I really like it. And we looked at Tesseract, we looked at Transcribers, and each of them seemed to require so much fiddling and training, and also giving up sovereignty. I suppose that was one of the issues. That in the end we just went with Textract, and we've been very happy with it. So yeah, just a suggestion.
Cool. I'm just going to put up a website here for people, and if you want to pursue that journey, go for it. No one product rules the world, but
absolutely,
of course, with Amazon in the New Zealand context, there's real questions about data sovereignty and where you're offshoring or onshoring your data.
But you can do that. So we have done that. We've specified the servers are in Australia. We've opted out of their use of any of the material in training, and also the use of any of the material that's stored in S3. So they have this capability to opt out, but you have to be sure to do it.
Yeah, indeed. It's probably the fine print. Anyway, I think we're moving towards conclusion, are we, Basil?
I think so, Sydney. Yeah.
I think so. Well, thank you all for tuning in. We've lost a few people along the way, but by the head count, I think we're up to 60 odd, not
Wow.
odds, but 60 plus, and we had over 100 registrants. So in due course, the recording will be available, and we hope you can engage again. Thank you, Sarah. We've got the hard sell for AI for LAM. So yes, if you go into those spaces, you'll not only find out a bit more about our organization if you don't know already. We will convert you to the cause, that's for sure. We have a very active Slack workspace, and included in that is just release call for papers for Fantastic Futures 2025. So any of you want to head over to the British Library, they're the hosts. And we'll be in the afterglow of an amazing conference that was held in Canberra through the National Film and Sound Archive. And so that was an experience. And some of the conversations we've been having on these webinars have come out of that conference. Opportunities for lightning talks to turn into more sustained engagement. So we really appreciate you for Kate and Asa and our other players to be able to share more widely what you do and to go into greater depth. So it's been really, really encouraging. Fantastic. Which means that if any of you out there in Slack land and in AI for LAM land, try and say that, have a topic that you're interested in speaking to or want to find more out about, you can put it in the Slack channel and let us know, and we'll try and organize, engineer, and otherwise twist a few people's arms and get something in front of you that would be of value to the community. So all in all, thank you once again, and kia ora tātou, and we look forward to seeing you, hearing from you, and being in your place, wherever you are in the world in future. Thanks so much. Take care. Mate wa.